Hello, everyone, and welcome to Time in the Round, a podcast dedicated to talking about all things Yu-Gi-Oh! I'm Ruben.
And I'm Joe, and we've had a huge week. A ban list finally dropped. We've had a bit of a week to digest it and even try it out for the first time. I haven't played much Yu-Gi-Oh! This week, but Ruben sure has. So yeah, we got a lot to discuss. We'll just get straight into it. 40 minutes starts now.
Time has begun, and what a way to start our week. Because it was Monday for us, is that correct? Or was it the Tuesday? Monday.
I think it was Monday, yeah.
So, we've got a new Forbidden Limited list. This comes into effect at time of recording tomorrow in New Zealand, but obviously it will come to effect Tuesday, or Monday for the rest of the world. I guess, which is also tomorrow, but, whatever. Time zones are strange. So this was announced last week, Monday, coming into effect on the 13th of February. I think I talked about it. I was expecting a ban list, but at the same time, I wasn't, due to the events that were upcoming.
I think having a YCS literally happening right now as we speak would have been maybe a strange choice by Konami to have a ban list come into effect in between two major events, because no disrespect to anyone at Leon right now, but no one really cares as much because the format's kind of done, right? They're playing in a format that's kind of been, as soon as a ban list is announced, players like to kind of just think that that's now the list, even though there is a set date. No one really cares. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's very strange watching an event and the coverage that for it, just knowing that in 24 hours it's obsolete. Oh my gosh, crazy. The Ishizu Telement deck played 3 of every name and 3 of every Miller and 3 of every Shuffler and Kit Koloss. Wow, that's groundbreaking, really.
Yeah, and I'm glad to say that this ban list was the shakeup that the game finally received, I guess. Well, we'll get into it straight away. There's a few things that I joked around with you on here that Konami use Internet Explorer, and sometimes it takes a while for them to buffer and do a hit. And that first hit was Artifact Scythe. A strange one. I mean, needed, but kind of delayed.
It's kind of giving the Curious hit when we'd all moved past Curious. Not that Curious is a bad card, obviously, very powerful. It sends cards from deck to grave, which is exactly what the Telement strategy did, but, in peak tier element Ishizu format, when Curious was the ban, I think a lot of people just kind of raised eyebrows. I think similar vein for this, I guess a lot of people, not even, obviously since, Sanctum's been out since Primal Origin, and as the strategies have developed, obviously using Baron de Fleur to destroy a set artifact site and then reborn it, Dagda existing as a link monster. We've definitely had formats where Scythe was the problem by country mile, like the amount of times that I think even PK Adventure, it was just with Destroyer, Phoenix, Enforcer. I think Scythe is a problem. I don't know if it's the hit, but I'm glad it's gone.
I think it was kind of a preemptive thing, just in case if some people tried to just kind of default back into that Scythe lock deck. It's kind of like what Rogue strategies did for a long time. I think a lot of people discussed online, now that it's gone, most people have to play their deck and not just set up a Scythe lock anymore. But since Bestials came around, obviously the Scythe Engrave was a lot weaker, and most people, the only way they were getting it out was with usually Artifact Sanctum.
Exactly. Which is a 3-off trap you have to draw, and you can't draw Scythe.
But yeah, I mean, speaking of another hit that stopped people from playing the game and has finally gone, and I think we are all in agreement on this one, is the Barrier Statue of the Storm Winds. Finally banned.
This is a long time coming. I think a lot of people have waited for this hit since the deck since Flaunderies as a strategy became, relevant. It has been effective since it came out, and was at this moment of time, prior to the ban list, the only deck from Burst of Destiny format that continued to be meta relevant.
Mm.
and we're now over a year since that set released, and Floowandereeze consistently made finals at YCS's. Never won it, but yeah, to me this is like the most logical hit.
Yeah, I think so. And as for like Fluandereeze players, they definitely got some really good value out of their deck. I mean, you could have bought that right on release and played it the whole way through for a year and a half of Yu-Gi-Oh! And in those terms, like it's a pretty budget deck considering it doesn't need an extra deck and all that sort of thing. So for those players, they can't be that upset with it. They've got their time. I think Fluandereeze as a deck now sits in this weird, like, kind of rogue area. Like it does hurt the deck a lot losing Stormwinds. But in a way, it makes it slightly fairer again. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I think the best description I saw online is that I think Floowandereeze have, if you use your hand and every finger you have as kind of a card that Floowandereeze have, being obviously like Impin, Riser, Avian, Barrier Statue, and like Dreaming Town, it's like you lost the middle finger, which is the bird.
Mm.
So I'm glad to see Barrier Statue go. I think it's been a long time coming.
One discussion point I would like to bring up around the barrier statue though is, do you think that something like Smorg, the Link 2, could now come back into the game? Or was it the
No.
Link 3, sorry?
No,
No?
the Link 3 is too strong, and simply because of another hit on this list, it provides targeting protection. Uh,
Mm.
so I think that the Samorg Link will probably rightly stay on the ban list for a little bit longer, maybe at least until something like Tri Brigade move out of it, and you actually have to play a Winged Beast Wind deck to use it,
Mm.
as opposed to cheat it out like Tri Brigade did.
Yeah, fair. Yeah.
Hit number 3, which is
First of many for them.
first of many for the strategy, is the banning of Telements Kit Coloss.
Needed, I think. I think
So
everyone kind
needed.
of, yeah, everyone saw this coming. Obviously, this is the card that allowed you to like start off with your mill 5, usually a mill 8, and hit every single shuffler, and it was just like you pull your hair out when you're sitting across the table from this, and someone just hits like every single mill off this card, off of like an instant fusion or something ridiculous like that. So yeah, it makes the setup, I guess, for Tier Element a lot worse now. Like they don't have the fusion that just like loads the grave up anymore.
Not only
If
that, they've lost the fusion that gets the rotor, like
mm,
that fixes them for any card they're missing.
yeah.
Obviously provides the name for Telements Rule Coloss because it is listed on Rule Coloss's fusion material.
I think this one here is a big hit to Tier Element. I feel like they obviously, when we get into the limited section, we can have more discussion around this. But even with this hit alone, it definitely pulled the power level of the deck down a little bit. We saw in OCG they also did this, and the deck survived. But TCG, it's going to be a little bit different, I think.
I think so too. I'm happy to see this go. I played this deck. I knew this card was broken. Why is it level 5? Why is it not like Chi Zhao? You can only use one of the effects per turn. They just clearly took off all like power, controlling when
Mm,
it comes to this. So good. It's a good ban. And then our fourth and final one, I believe it's only 4 bans,
mm.
um, was Sprite Elf.
Yeah, and this one, I wouldn't say it shocked me, but like I didn't think they were going to go this way with it. I thought that they might have maybe limited some of the consistency pieces in the Sprite deck. Sprite Elf obviously provides a really good link too for like lots of other decks as well. I was using it myself in the Libro Meganko build, so I've lost a card. This is the only card I lost in the list, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, Sprite Elf, obviously a very, very strong card, like probably slightly too strong, providing a reborn and target protection. Um, and so generic. I think that's the main mistake they made with Sprite Elf, was how generic it was.
Oh, 100%. Also, this card needed to read more fix. It needed to include a sprite monster. It needed to
Mm,
only protect sprite monsters it points to. There's so many different aspects of this card that, it will probably need some sort of balancing tool for it to ever come back into the TCG. It being, like you say, that kind of, in literal definition, Sprite Elf isn't a generic Link 2. However, in application it is. Everyone played Charmers. Everyone played Link 2s that you would put into things. IPs, nightmares. We were using it with Cross Sheep. There are so many
Mm.
people play Link 2s. There's level 2s, Merleys, obviously, in Telements. There's just so much in the strategy in the game that utilize level twos. So to me, Elf needed to go. It just needed it. It's too generic, and also, well, yes, it doesn't lend itself nicely to the new format. It opens the door for power spells such as Ultimate Slayer.
Yeah.
The targeting protection is just the most insane part of that card by far.
I think this one became more apparent after because like the original OTS 21 leaks had Sprite Elf as an ultimate. Like lots of people thought it was an ultimate rare in that set. So like everyone was like, oh, well, they won't hit Elf then, and I think that's what kind of skewed people's view on it. And then as soon as the actual leaks came out that it was in fact Sprite Blue that became the ultimate rare, that's kind of when everyone was like, oh, maybe Elf is gone, and what do you know, it was. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I think realistically, it's a good hit to go. Obviously, it's unfortunate for all the sprite variants, but the card's too generic. It's too accessible.
and before we move on to the limited section, is there anything else that you think that could have been on this list?
um, no.
I think that I'm almost in that same boat. Like, there's nothing out there that screamed out ban me. Like maybe I would have argued instant fusion, but like that would be in the case where Kit Carlos doesn't get banned.
Remains.
But then again, maybe things like instant fusion being banned are like a preventative thing in the future, because it just means that any level 5 fusion that has a decent effect all of a sudden becomes broken, and that's what we kind of saw. I know,
Yeah,
yeah,
maybe like terraforming, but
yeah.
like again, it's always strange to like hit like ban a consistency card, like banning Upstart Goblin. Like, what does that
Hmm.
achieve? Oh, I lose a free spell, I guess.
Yeah, but
It's
overall, I
it's
think,
strange. Yeah. Apart from that, nothing really
yeah,
jumped out to me as like I can't believe they missed X. Can't believe they didn't ban Y.
I think overall, like this is probably one of the banners that has the least like arguments on it for forbidden cards.
Mm.
No one's really too like, oh, why did they ban Barrier Statue? Or why did they ban Kakalas? Everyone knows that they should have gone, and Konami followed through with it this time, so it's good.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the only question people had is like, why did you ban Scythe this late? But
Yes.
so be it. Moving on. We are off to the limited section now, and boy, what a limited section it is!
Yeah.
My goodness. I guess we'll start strong. We have the Earth Fairies that were introduced for the Ishizu Ishtar archetype, being Argido, Kelbek, Keldo, and Mudora, all put to one.
So yeah, stronger hit than the OCG, and that's the bit where it changes slightly. Like, obviously in the OCG, I think they only limited two of them, and
They
the other
limited
two,
Argido and Keldo, so they have
yeah,
4 Millers and 4 Shufflers available in OCG format.
yeah, which obviously makes that deck a lot stronger still. Like, if that was the case with in our one, I think I would have a lot stronger hopes for Tear Element to continue as like the best deck. Um, but hitting every single one of them to one, I feel like all of these now you're going to be maybe seeing them, maybe even sent off Beatrice as like a little extra thing. But like I don't know, like people will still probably run them in certain decks, like where they can, but
Yeah.
they're not going to be in your face as much.
Oh, it's also once you see the one, you go, cool, that's it. You're not going to hit anything else.
Mm,
I don't have
yeah,
to ever worry about going from turn 2 onwards, you dealing with this again, unless I see you use your one of Shuffler to put it back.
yeah,
So,
yeah. I think
to me,
it balances
very
them.
happy.
Yeah.
Very happy. I think and Shufflers has drastically opened the format because those cards single-handedly prohibited so many decks from competing.
Mm. Yeah, I think anyone who was trying to play a deck in the last format that was grave orientated in any way just couldn't. It was
No.
just so hard. I mean, I can attest to it. Like with certain decks that I play, it was just such a struggle. Even like things like Dragon Link, you're trying to set your grave up, and then they just do that to you, like shuffle
Yep,
away
shuffle it
everything,
away.
or it was too much. And I feel like limiting them all probably a good idea. I don't think banning them is like fair. I suppose like they are pretty new still. and I feel like they can still see some niche play in certain decks. So I'm happy to see them still be in the game. But yeah, I feel like going forward, it's not going to be as big of an issue.
Agreed. And I'm happy to see it in a limited capacity. I think that it's
Yeah.
nice to acknowledge those cards are powerful. I'm never going to deny that. But I'm very happy to know that, that's they are now known quantities as opposed to unknown quantities.
Hmm.
Speaking of known quantities,
Yeah, I mean, I guess we could go through these ones one by one because they are kind of unique in their effects. But the Tear Element Havness is the first one we'll talk about of the three. Limited. So Havness, you're no longer going to be, I guess, tiptoeing around in your opponent's turn, or in your own turn, like not trying to like trigger a Havness in your opponent's hand all the time now. So that's nice. Havness was
so
pretty
glad.
free, to be honest. Like it was so like unfair that they would just finish their turn and you feel like you've cleared their whole entire board somehow, and then you activate one more effect and they're like, oh yeah, by the way, Havness, mill free, fuse. Oh, my whole build's back. It's
Yeah.
it was broke. I feel like out of all of them, I've always thought that Havness and maybe Merly with the like kind of level 2 attribute were the two like most abused. Shiren being very strong as well, but yeah, I'm happy to see Havness at 1. And yeah, but speaking of that, the other two, Merly and Shiren also to 1. So what are your thoughts on those?
Oh, so glad. Havness by far and large was the most impactful. I very vividly recall playing against my YCS Sydney round 7 opponent, activating Havness and hitting Merly Keldo Kelbeck
Oof.
and completely stopping his entire setup on his turn 1. And after the match, he goes, I've never seen anyone play that much on my turn 1. So very happy to see Havness go. It promotes you just comfortably activate monster effects and maybe you play into it once every 2-3 matches.
Mm.
Merly, level 2 is the biggest concern with this one. Obviously, the mill 3 is like really impactful still, but level 2 access being, the sprites, previously elf, still sprint. I think realistically it adds a lot. And it
Mm.
always was the kind of auxiliary play. If your fusions were getting bestialed, if you used your 3 diffusion and your 4 diffusion, you always ensured you had a 2 remaining. So you had to put your opponent on having the Sarania, essentially, or the 3rd bestial, to stop at least one fusion summon. So very glad to see that go. And Shiren being the free 4 extender, a special summon that can also discard and then send the top 3 from deck to grave is Incredulous. The free level 4 bodies, 4 Xyz plays, Dweller, Zeus, Dweller, Redoer, Baguska. I think it's, also
I
glad to
always
see it go.
with my time with I never played the Ajizu Telement, but I was playing it in its sort of first iteration. And every time you just opened a Shiren, you were like, "Oh, this feels good." Like
I'm
it
comfy.
was, yeah, it was one of the best starter cards for the deck. And I think with all of that stuff limited, we'll get onto that discussion right at the end around the winners and losers of the ban list. But I feel like these hits were what the players wanted. Like people were kind of sick of playing against tier elements. Moving on to the one limited card coming back off the list and not related to tier element at all is the Ancient Fairy Dragon. Obviously, this is not coming back, I think, until like 23rd of March. Like it was saying, they did say on the
10th,
list that
10th of
the
March. 10th of
10th of
March.
March. Yeah, something like that. They're waiting for the errated version of this card to come out, which I believe is you can't add the same field spell anymore. It has to be a different one. I feel like this card will still see play though.
It's all once per turn, the effects. Yeah, this card's crazy. Still, we're in a format with Destrudo access. And I think that, more so, spoiler alert, I think level 7s are super accessible.
Mm.
Obviously, Sword Soul can still make level 7 synchros if you're banishing things like Summon or Emergence off a Taya. I think that there's a lot of access. I always thought Ancient Fairy Dragon was good. I think it maybe reads a little bit scarier in a format where like a lot of the top contending decks have field spells. Thinking Tearlament, obviously, Kashtira, Scareclaw, obviously, still around. Um, the even Labyrinth back row strategies, branded, you can play theater. There's a lot of field spell stuff. So being able to destroy field spells is pretty good, as well as obviously adding different ones. And additionally, just a free special summon. I think that's
Yeah.
still nothing to be scoffed at.
I think we'll see play in very niche kind of circumstances. I don't know if it's going to be splashed into every single meta deck that's out there at the moment. I know I've seen some people tinkering around with Dragon Link playing it, because obviously having access to a couple of different field spells and stuff like that and extended. But
Yeah,
yeah, overall, I'm almost looking forward to what people do come up with this card. I feel like it's not kind of ban worthy anymore, especially with the errata in place. It's definitely not a card that should be gone. There are more powerful cards in the game. But yeah, I look forward to it. It's another little toolbox that we've kind of acquired. So
yeah, I'm happy. I'm excited to see it come back. Also, spoiler alert, we're seeing a lot of like Signer Dragon support coming out in the next core
mm,
set. So to me, this makes sense as like the only one that's banned to
yeah,
bring it back.
and
Um,
yeah, with that, we'll move on to the huge semi-limited list. Yeah, there was no semi-limits. Yeah, it was
oh,
bad
amazing!
joke.
So thankful. That section needs to go. Every card at 2 should just be at 3.
Yeah,
Uh, there's no way that this list needs to exist. Maybe malicious, but you know what? Just give hero players a
even
crown.
then, just give it. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's fine.
So moving on to the unlimits. 7 unlimits.
Most of these are kind of like not really worth discussing, but like the one that a
Also,
lot of people are worried about and feel like could do something is just Destrudo coming back to 3.
really interesting because the one I've heard about is Lithosygem.
Oh yeah, that too.
Um,
Yeah, yeah.
so 7 unlimits. All of these cards went from 1 to 3. So Destrudo, I think, is the best one in terms
Yeah.
of like generic accessibility. With Ancient Fairy Dragon coming back, this is the best access to it. Uh,
I feel like
so
it's
yeah,
probably fine though, right? I feel this it's a big cost. Like obviously, life points don't matter too much, but like losing half straight away puts you in kind of a
pretty
scary
easy kill
position at
range.
times. Yeah, yeah. So like, it's a big cost. It's gonna just make your distributor plays a lot more like consistent, I suppose. But I don't see myself really using it. Um,
Neither do I. I don't think like Destrudo is like gonna break the bank. Also, what formats did you play more than one Destrudo? Like Block Dragon BA? Like
hmm, yeah,
that's
it doesn't really
yeah,
matter.
it kind of lends itself to like a combo centric format, which we're definitely not in at this moment in time. Um, quickly over Jet Synchron and O-Line. These are just kind of like the sins of Hulk
Hmm.
being undone. Especially O-Line. Without a Rodon, you've got no free way to trigger it. So kind of okay with it. Maybe Jet Synchron being a 1.5 card link too, but to what? I'm not sure.
I think both of those cards are like kind of, as you say, like completely fine.
Yeah, it's just kind of like the sins of Hulk's past being undone. Lithosygem's probably my discussion point. Um, Obviously, True King's very strong, destroying attributes to summon, very good. Diagram is still at 1. However, Lithosygem's quite good in a dinosaur strategy when you have earth monsters that you would love to destroy in hand. And we
Hmm.
are seeing now more than ever that extra deck interruption is pretty impactful, I would say.
Yeah, I think this one's very interesting, especially with new Dino support coming around, like coming out. Not, I don't think soon, but like that has been announced that there's some new Dino cards on their way.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think obviously True King was it was a bit of a issue back in the day when dinos were around. I don't think it's ever really been a thing while some of the newer dinosaur stuff uh that came out. What was it, the name of that?
Animadorn Darkosaur.
Yeah, I don't think he was around when True King Lilifigasm was around last time. So I feel the Dino deck could be quite consistent now and quite powerful and quite strong.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, you do still have to open the Lithosygem. Its diagram is still at 1, so you functionally have 4 copies of it. I guess you could small world into it if you're that desperate. Um, but I think that level 9 bodies are definitely nothing to scoff at. You can probably still make like an Interblathnia style play. Obviously, you've got no True King of all Calamities, which is obvious what they would go into.
mm,
But I'm interested to see how this performs. I think it's a nice thing to see come back, especially with this kind of dinosaur support on the horizon. 1 misc though, so still okay with it.
yeah,
Yatagarasu, this card didn't do anything at 1, so of course it wasn't going to do anything at 3. Um, oh no, you attack me directly with Yata. Cool.
yeah. I think this card is kind of a relic of Yu-Gi-Oh's past now. Obviously, Yacht a lot back in the day when the game was played at like a very slow pace with not a lot of disruption. Very
Yeah,
strong.
yeah.
Nowadays, eh, like if someone somehow manages to clear everything on the field, rip your whole hand, and attack you, they probably deserve the win anyway. So
Honestly,
like,
I'd give it to them. Yeah, I'd be. You know what? Congratulations.
I just don't see it. I don't think
No,
it will see any play. But cool for the people that might be able to lab something up that they can play a Yata lock deck again. Maybe, I don't know.
I might not encourage that behavior. Servant of Endymion from 1 to 3. I have been clamoring for this unlimit for years, it feels like.
Yeah.
This is a relic of the 2020
Mm.
hit. Oh, I can hear spoiler alert, I can hear warning alarms going off now. Or the cyclone we're about to endure.
Oh
Um,
right, yeah.
yep, thanks so much. Emergency alerts. Servant of Endymion from 1 to 3. This is a unlimit I have been clamoring for years. This is a relic of the January 2020 ban list when they hit the top decks, and unfortunately,
Yeah.
Pendulum was just at the 5th place, so they decided to hit it too, being obviously Electromite ban and Servant of Endymion to 1. This
A
card
weird
never.
hit even back then.
Weird hit back then, weird limit to this day. Every list, this card never needed to be at 1. It could have just easily done the transition from 2 to 3, and it would have never been that impactful. Okay, you can more consistently get a monster negate on board. That's cool. You're not doing that if your zones get pendulum locked by Kashtira. Um,
Mm. I
and
think it's fine.
I think it's fine. Also, Pseudonym Endymion does benefit from the April 2020 revisions as well, even though obviously it's like 3 years ago now. Meaning that if you ash it, you can still try and activate it again, which is very nice. So, long time coming for this unlimit, for sure.
I don't know if it's gonna do enough for Pendulum. I think that their key to like actually get them back into the game now is still Electromite, and they haven't got that still. And I mean, you're right. Like it gives them another tool, I suppose, but like they have literally every single thing almost off the ban list that they need to be at full strength, and they're still not going to be quite doing it. So yeah, I feel having Servant back in the game, you're going to see some more Endymion decks maybe crop up a little bit, but like they are very much at a rogue level, especially with Kashtira around. Like being a Pendulum player is just very hard right now.
Yeah. I think Draco Slayers do Pendulum better. I think that
Yep,
their suite of access is like so much nicer than Pendulum, like than Endymion does.
it's a
Um,
bit more clunky, right?
it's definitely not as spell reliant.
Mm,
Because like Draco Slayers play so beautifully within their own engine, whereas like Endymion, you kind of have to have this balance of like pendulum monsters and spell cards. Not to
yeah,
mention, obviously, Endymion Pendulum at its peak was 3 desires, 3 into the void, upstart goblins, everything under the sun, Whereas
mm,
now a lot of that's limited. Obviously, even desires being semi probably does hit some consistency in this deck a little bit.
yeah. The last one on the unlimited list, Spiral Resort. I suppose not a lot to talk about there.
No, I did get some people saying that they're having flashbacks to a format with Ancient Fairy Dragon, 3 Destrudo, and 3 Resort,
Mm,
which I think was obviously like peak Spiral format, which you and I didn't play.
yeah,
But Master Plan's still banned, so this is no cause for concern for me. I will enjoy seeing Spiral players do something funny, because you also can't use Ancient Fairy Dragon to get another copy of Resort, which is balanced.
yeah.
So that's it. 7 unlimits, 8 limits, and 4 bans. Healthy. Healthy
Healthy,
amount.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely done a lot to shift the meta from what we were in beforehand. Like, obviously, we were, as I said a few weeks ago, we were kind of stuck in a bit of a tournament purgatory as such. Like, we couldn't get away from the deck. Like, if you weren't playing the deck, every game was like just such a battle. Like, it didn't take away from the fun of Yu-Gi-Oh, I guess. Like, it still was a pretty good game, but like, I don't know, for me, being able to like now look at some other options, look at other things, and be like, right, I can play that again, or I can use this and it's strong. I was a bit hesitant before the ban list picking up that Mekanko core with the Ohimi being about $50 when I bought it, and I was a bit like, oh, maybe I shouldn't buy this. And now the ban list is hit, and all of a sudden that investment has become quite good.
Well, also you get so much access so many more decks. I definitely think that there's a lot of winners from this ban list, and to me, it's exciting to see what will be kind of the next progression for the format. So in my eyes, I think winners rogue decks.
Yeah.
Um, and then in terms of competitive strategies, I would say obviously Kashtira, but that wasn't never going to get hit. I think people that thought that deck was going to get hit preemptively were a little bit delusional. We haven't had it as long as OCG have by any means, so I didn't think there was ever going to be a hit to that strategy. Obviously, Bestial Branded, another really good contender moving into this format. Albaz still very strong, Branded Fusion still very strong. And then, some other iterations of decks. Labyrinth as a premier back row format strategy, I think is really impactful. And, even something like Sky Striker, Power Spells being super impactful. I think there's a lot available to you.
I mean, even with cards like Thrust coming out for Striker as such, like you can now search your engage again with by other means, or search other spells. I don't know. There's so many options again. Like for me, everyone knows that I like Drytron, and that's been sitting in my folder for the last like probably good portion of a year because it just wasn't playable and it wasn't up to scratch against like Bestials and Tear And I feel like now with Tear not being everywhere, like running 9 Bestials is just not going to happen anymore because of Kashtira. So decks that now were, unplayable before because they relied on their graveyard are back. And for me, it gives me a lot of hope for the format. Like, I don't like Kashtira. I think that I use those words quite a lot. I just, I don't know, I just don't like the deck. I feel like it's a bit helmet. It's a bit like one-dimensional and boring for me. But like, I understand that it's kind of good in a way as well, and that's something that we spoke about. How sometimes it is good to have decks that are like tier 1 and easy to play. So yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to it. I feel like it's going to be hopefully slightly more diverse than we've had in recent times. There's a lot to look forward to.
I really think it's going to be nice and diverse. I also like when there's a tier 1 deck that's really easy to answer. The problem with Tearlament is that it was just they knew their answers and they could play around all of them. Something like Kashtira, they know what answers their deck, but they can't play around it all. They
Yeah.
can't, you can't prep for Book of Eclipse and Nibiru and Kurikara and Evenly Matched. And, there's so many ands in that lineup that I
Yeah.
think make it so, yes, it's a good strategy. Yes, it's unfortunate if you don't draw your interruption. Yes, it sucks even more if they open Dimension Shifter, but it's not unbeatable. Which I think is like the big thing that I want people to like understand when it comes to this format. Yes, it's annoying. Yes, the strategy is good. Yes, you do have to build your deck differently. You have to play multiples of cards you wish to see in your extra deck. But apart from that, your answers are relatively there. I mean, Impermanence pretty cost effective. Nibiru's I think still relatively cost effective. Book of Eclipses are like kind of expensive, but
You
after
can get the rares and Tama, I think.
exactly Tama
Yeah.
rares, I think that there's so many accessible answers to that deck. I think especially Branded Ash Blossom still works. That's never that hasn't changed. Impermanence still strong.
You're right. The decks that are now coming to the top are not like Tear That had to be one of the most resistant kind of decks I've ever played against. Like even to a sense, like they could not like play around the shifter, but they could at least survive a turn, put up something, and then like maybe play the following turn. Like there was just nothing that completely stopped it. Whereas you're right, this format, Ash on a branded fusion can just spell the end of the turn for the branded player sometimes. Like if they just don't have any follow up. If you Lava Golem a Kashtira field, sometimes they're just like, okay, then I lose.
Yeah.
There are things in there that like any rogue player can just show up and be like, right, I have a Lava Golem in my main deck. I can now just get rid of your board and actually play the game. So yeah, I think while you're right, like the Kashtira deck that's been touted as the new Floowandereeze, it is kind of like to play against. At least you can like just do things against them if you make a deck correctly.
Yeah, it's not impossible. I think Teeleman at full power was leaps and bounds better than Kashtira, but
Oh
like I
yeah,
think anyone would agree with that. I think the only difficulty I have with something like this format moving forward is obviously in a tier 0, tier 0.5 format, you know exactly how to build your side deck. Whereas with a really open format, you kind of have to be a bit more encompassing with your deck building. So I think my
yeah.
advice moving forward for this format to people who are wanting to play is find a strategy that you really enjoy and learn its weaknesses and how it also plays into the current, meta matches. I think it'll be hard to kind of determine those decks at this moment in time, especially because the ban list isn't legal. So, we don't
Yeah.
have tournaments to go off of. Our first indication of the new format will be at a competitive level, the Team YCS taking place in Vegas next weekend, or Card Merchant Hamilton's 1 year anniversary birthday, 1 year anniversary celebration for those who are attending. So, I think that it's the format's open. You get to choose what you want to play, which is, I think, really exciting.
I think so, yeah, and I feel will bring some players back that were getting a bit fatigued from the last format. Um, I know for me, for sure, like I've got a few decks now that I can like lab with and like sit there and play and work out how I want to progress into the format, how I want to like take on Kashtira, how I have to still be aware of decks like branded. When you're building a deck, you need to like think how many of each deck are going to be at that tournament, and like there's a lot more thought going into it now. Before it was, have I got 9 cards dedicated to tier element? Yes, cool, I can play, right? Now you have to think, right, there's going to be Kashtira, there's going to be Branded, there's still going to be Sprite, in my opinion. I feel like that deck's
Yep.
still going to be okay. Tier element, I'm not 100% sure on. I feel like it's going to take a little bit of time for people to come up with some kind of really playable version of the deck. I don't think it's going to be a tier 1 meta threat that I feel like it will probably sit down in the tier 2 rogue kind of strategy now.
Uh,
But still
yeah,
probably
it's
be
still
aware of it.
competent. Obviously, the big difference is that we have with the OCG in terms of the list. Yes, we've got all the names at one. We do still have 3 Rhino, 3 Field Spell. So
Hmm.
the searchability of these cards is still relatively high. Slash access, obviously being Rhino Heart being accessible. But I think that, yeah, the explosiveness of the deck has been thoroughly quashed, which is
Even
nice.
even King of the Swamp, I think is
Yeah,
the build going forward as well. Like there's still cards that you could put in a branded engine and still play branded tier element. Like it still provides fusion monsters that activate engrave to like just get free stuff, right? So like
yeah,
it's still going to be an engine and like still something to kind of keep an eye out for.
yeah.
Because if one of these players all of a sudden come out at YCS Vegas with some really wacky build of tier element that no one's thought of, it could all of a sudden we could be in an OCG situation where they've tried to get rid of it and it still lingers.
Yeah, but I think that what the limiting of especially these millers and shufflers do is it opens up to those more comfortable decks. Like, I think
Mm.
I joke about it. I think I've got like 8 decks in my bag right now that are just like sitting there competent and just require more learning. I have the Telements, obviously. We've talked about Libromancer Mikanko. I have the Kashtira. I have the Gold Pride Punk. Like, Synchro
Mm.
Engine stuff is super fun. And you've got the Labyrinth, which I think is my personal pick for the
The
strategy moving,
format,
like
yeah,
the
yeah,
the the deck moving forward. I think that with millers and shufflers going, trap based strategies are a lot more comfortable because there's just you're just not going to lose your resources turn one.
yeah.
Yeah. So it's nice to have the ability to open up the format and enjoy just kind of a pet deck, something that you know how to play well, something you know pilots well into a format like this, something you know that plays well into something like Cash and Branded.
Mm.
It's
Yeah, I'm
comfy.
looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to seeing the whole. There's a whole round of regionals coming up. There's the NZ Open. I'm going to get to commentate over these games in the new format, and I'm happy that I'm not going to just sit there commentating on 25 tier element mirror matches in a row. It's going to be interesting. There's going to be other decks that show up. That's going to be, maybe not triangle format as such, but like there's going to just be more options available for everyone, and it will be more entertaining to watch. That's for sure.
Oh, 100%. And with that, that is time in the round. I guess before we go, I'm gonna throw a little rapid fire or rapid, one answer question. What is your pick to win Leon?
Well, Leon would be probably still tier element, like
Yeah.
because it's a full power. I still think that deck will just rise to the top. Still, I know Keshchira is like kind of the answer to it, but I think with the engine that they have and just the consistency that they are making those ridiculous boards, I feel like they all win it.
I'm going to have to give it to... I'm going to make my pick Flaunderies. I will find it hilarious if the last event of this format they get to play and win with, the winner YCS with. So I'm going to give it to the little birds that could, because they've been here for a long time.
And what about you, Elliot? Can you give me an answer?
Exodia FTK? What?
Whoa!
My God, really left field, but I'll give you that one. But yeah, so that's us. Thank you so much for listening. As always, if you like what you're listening to and you're listening along on your favorite podcasting app, please feel free to subscribe to us. Please rate and review our podcast. Please give it 5 stars. We are now on Apple Podcasts for those people who use it. So please follow us there as well as Spotify. If you're listening along with us on YouTube, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Share it with a friend. It helps out greatly. And we will be back for another episode next week. I'm Ruben.
And I'm Joe.
And in the new format, it's still going to be time in the round.